Welcome to Juck on Bucks. Appreciate you so much for joining me for a little midday conversation as we have seen a whole lot of action today. Obviously, starting off the day with Brian Hartline taking the USF job. What would be the trickle-down effect? We talked about this wide receiver class and what it was going to look like heading into today. And my thought was, despite the noise around Jaquaden Guilford, the noise around Jaden Ricketts with him going to visit West Virginia, Jaquaden Guilford with the big LSU offer from Lane Kiffin, who he previously was potentially going to commit to at Ole Miss. Well, now LSU, it's a much bigger opportunity than Ole Miss, and Lane wants to make a splash. How do you make a splash? Well, you pull a wide receiver commit from Ohio State, who's the number one player in Indiana, who you really like, and he really likes Jaquaden Guilford. Jaquaden likes him. LSU, a little bit of a different animal to go up against than Ole Miss, but Brian Hartline was able to secure Jaquaden Guilford. Then, of course, you got Chris Henry Jr. and the noise around him, which obviously has been going on for years now, multiple years, and Oregon, in the end here, seems like it was a real, possibility that the offer on the table could be too lucrative for him to pass up. Now, ultimately, Brock Boyd was going to be locked in regardless, no matter what. And that's great news listen to what Mark Pantoni said about Brock Boyd.
What does he bring that maybe the receiver room hasn't had?
Yeah, I think Brock is probably the most underrated wide receiver in the country, just from a ranking standpoint. He's at a prominent high school in the state of Texas and breaks the school record there. In the playoffs right now, he's just dominating every game he plays in. So Hartline did a great job, when he went down there. It was either last winter or spring, and said, "Hey, Mark, this is the guy we need to get."
So Brock Boyd, Pantoni agrees with me. He agrees with me that Brock Boyd is a valid recipient of the Juckeye annual Isaiah West most underrated prospect of the year award. Isaiah West wins the award last year, cashes in. Brock Boyd will be next, and Brock, absolutely rock solid. He's in, already sent in his stuff. So is Jaquaden Guilford. Chris Henry Jr. did his ceremony at Mater Dei, and in his ceremony at Mater Dei, they said Ohio State. In that press conference Mark Pantoni had that was at 12:30, it's right now 2:47, he was asked a question about Chris Henry Jr., and he said, "I can only talk about guys who have signed." So as of 12:30, Chris Henry Jr. had not signed yet. And what, could be a lot of reasons for that. Who knows? It's still up in the air right now. Pantoni was asked, what do you do in these situations? Obviously they want to get it done, but you give them their time and let them think things over. And this early signing period does run through Friday. So still waiting on word for Chris Henry Jr. to make it official. Obviously the Hartline stuff is huge news, as the development at Ohio State for wide receivers is why he's coming. It's why most of these guys come. And Hartline is the one behind that. And he's now gone. Some people have said you got Devin Jordan there, and, the wide receiver room is in good hands. And I'll tell you what, I got a lot of respect for Devin Jordan. But Devin Jordan, there's a little bit of pause there with Devin Jordan. I mean, number one, I've talked to a lot of recruits. I've never heard a single recruit bring up Devin Jordan. Never heard it once. I often hear names of the guys behind the scenes from guys at other position groups. I've never heard Devin Jordan. And then when we look at the development of the wide receivers this year with Brian Hartline being in the booth, did we see this year potentially some guys maybe not take that next step that we were thinking we might see, like a Mylan Graham, etc.? Maybe that's just coincidence, but it seems like with Hartline being in the booth and being preoccupied with the offensive game plan, that maybe it would just make sense. He might not have had as much time with these wide receivers as he usually did. And, is Devin Jordan that dude? I doubt he's the guy that ends up with the job, but he can certainly hold it together for the time being. Is he the guy that's going to make these wide receivers feel like things are just going to keep on rolling? Who knows? They got to trust Ryan Day. And Ryan Day reached out to every single one of these wide receivers at 6:30 this morning and let them know. Hartline reached out as well. Tom Loy reported that Chris Henry Jr., Tom Loy of 247, had not heard from Hartline, which I don't believe for a second. So we're still waiting on the Chris Henry Jr. thing. Now, Jaquaden Guilford tweeted that he was going to be signing. Here's the tweet that he tweeted earlier in the day. So he tags Hartline, tweets that he's going to be signing. I'm signing with Ohio State. And then you click on it and it's been erased. So he erased that tweet. And as of now, Jaquaden Guilford up in the air. Chris Henry Jr. still not in yet. So you've got Caden Dixon-Wyatt, who, as we knew already, was going to flip to USC. And that was going to happen regardless of the Brian Hartline news, and he did. So he flips to USC. And you've officially right now just got Brock Boyd and Jaquaden Guilford. If you're going by the rankings, it is, and I'm getting some information right now, the two lowest ranked guys. And we right now have an update from Chris Henry Jr. right now, as Chris Henry Jr. just makes a statement now saying, I have not signed yet. I'm still trying to weigh my options due to coaching changes. I just want to make the right decision for my future. God's plan. Okay. So Chris Henry Jr. clearly on the fence. Jaquaden Guilford clearly on the fence. You've already lost Caden Dixon-Wyatt. You got Brock Boyd. You got Jaquaden Guilford. Look, Jaquaden Guilford, this is a wide receiver class that has an opportunity to come in and make an impact immediately at Ohio State, the number one program in the country. But they are, many of them, coming for Brian Hartline just as much as Ohio State, because they've seen what Brian Hartline has done with guys, putting them into the NFL, and how successful and how ready and how prepared they are. Devin Jordan isn't that guy. He's learned from Brian Hartline, but that's not the guy. Brian Hartline's the guy. And right now, Brock Boyd is a guy who is advanced, who I think can come in and potentially make an impact in year 2 on the field. And that's great. Jaquaden Guilford is a guy with raw skills and raw ability, 10.5, 100-meter guy, speed, wasn't really a wide receiver in an offense that we would, there's not even much film on him playing wide receiver. They get him the ball in a lot of different ways, but they don't throw the ball downfield. He's got a long way to go in his development. And you've lost Caden Dixon-Wyatt, who's a guy who could have made an early impact. Chris Henry Jr. on the fence. Jaquaden Guilford seemingly on the fence. And we've already had a flip out of the class as well today, as Legend Bay, the superstar quarterback, dynamic athlete who Ohio State was able to, Texas kid, was able to flip from Tennessee into the class. And he was going to be used everywhere, but primarily, in my opinion, at running back, but some wide receiver, certainly some returning, just an ultimate weapon. The kid is just ridiculous on the field with the ball in his hands. He has flipped back to Tennessee. And this right here, I don't believe has anything to do with Brian Hartline. I think that this was going to happen regardless, though I didn't know about it ahead of time. I don't think this has anything to do with Hartline. I think this has to do with Tennessee and just a change of heart from Legend, who, honestly, if we're talking about Legend, he was just, look, I really liked him in the class. I really wanted him. I was really excited to see what they could do with him. And I liked the fact that they were even going after a guy like this, because it showed that they wanted to embrace just kind of some new things. And that was all great, but a luxury piece, a luxury item, a guy who 3 years from now, we very well could be saying, if he was in the Ohio State class and in the room, well, that didn't really work out like we thought it might. They didn't really use him much, but a loss nonetheless, but a luxury piece loss, nothing serious. The wide receiver situation right now, losing Hart, losing Caden Dixon-Wyatt, and potentially Chris, potentially Jaquaden Guilford. Well, Hartline, part of his recruiting pitch was, I don't ever take transfers, and he never has taken a transfer. That is certainly going to change moving forward. Should we see, even just one more decommitment? Because as we look at the wide receiver room, you look at next year, you've got Carnell leaving, so you got Jeremiah Smith in his third year, his final year. You've got Brandon Innes in his fourth year, his final year. That number 3 wide receiver spot up for grabs. Is it Quincy Porter? Is it Mylan Graham? I think it's Quincy Porter. And then after Quincy, you've got Mylan Graham. If he's still around, is he going to stick around? Is he happy? Who knows? Coaching change and everything. This also could lead to transfers out of the program with the coaching change. You got Bryson Rogers. Who knows what Bryson ends up doing? There's just a lot of questions here. But even if they stay, what we've seen out of these wide receivers, there's a lot of unproven here, which is why, to me, Chris Henry Jr. in this class makes so much sense. Chris Henry Jr., I think, could walk in and compete immediately, and just makes a ton of sense with or without Brian Hartline. But after those guys, what are we looking at here? You got Demarion Witten, who, kid out of Glenville, came in as a tight end. We hear very little about him. Des Jones, freshman out of New Jersey last year, a true slot receiver who production machine in high school. He's been kind of hurt, injured, hasn't done much. You got Phillip Bell, who in my opinion is going to be a guy who is an eventual starter at Ohio State. I thought he had a fantastic spring session and preseason session of practice, and he's really picking things up fast. He's not the fastest guy. He's not the most dynamic athlete, but he really knows how to play the wide receiver position, make some highlight reel catches, and I think he'll be a guy at some point that'll start at Ohio State. You got BP Miller, who's a multi-year project. So between BP, Demarion Witten, Jaden Ricketts, you've got guys that are projecty guys, which is great. You want to have those guys in the system, but as far as who can go now, there's questions here. There are questions. There are guys in the transfer portal market. And again, I'm getting way ahead of myself here because we don't even know how this is going to shake out. I'm just thinking worst case scenario. Should you happen to roll out of this signing class with, just Brock Boyd and just Jaden Ricketts, if Chris ends up going to Oregon, if Guilford ends up going to LSU, and we already know KDW is going to USC, and you have no wide receiver coach. So this day was not supposed to be wild like this. It turns out it is wild. And again, I'm sorry for babbling and going in many different directions here as I'm just gathering my thoughts. Obviously, Legend Bay officially out of the class. Legend Bay gone back to Tennessee. And that is a bummer, but not a big deal. Caden Dixon Wyatt leaving the class could be a big deal when we see how the rest of it shakes out. If Caden Dixon Wyatt was your number one dude, I would still feel pretty comfortable about it myself. KDW he's a top 10 wide receiver per 247. Rivals has never come around on him for whatever reason. They still got him ranked in the number 40-ish wide receiver in the country, which is absurd. He's a dog. He's a really good wide receiver. And his decision had nothing to do with Hartline. That was about geography. He didn't want to, leave home. That's fine. It is what it is. It happens. The modern day curse lives on, even if you get Chris Henry Jr., because Chris committed when he was at Winthrop in Cincinnati and then went out to Mater Dei. This might be a double whammy on the Mater Dei curse if he committed and then went out there and then ends up decommitting. But as the news keeps on rolling in, there's where we're at right now, guys. And of course, I will keep you posted. And don't forget that this evening, Buckeye Huddle primetime at 8 p.m. over on the Buckeye Huddle channel. Everything will be open. I'll be taking all your questions. I'll open up the phone lines. We got plenty to talk about. Of course, a lot of the talk will be about Hartline. A lot of the talk will be about Indiana. How much of this stuff is distracting everybody? How do you block this out? Because this is huge news at the Woody, right? This is huge news for every player on the team. When we talk about the coaching staff, Hart is like the second man. Like he has that aura around him, get off the field, blah, like he is like a head coach out there, a head coach to the head, the second guy up. He is a huge presence for this whole team. And this is big news that this is happening right before the championship game, right before the playoffs. Obviously he's staying and they're all happy for him and they've all tweeted their support. As for, JJ leaving, that's not happening. None of these guys that are playing right now are leaving. But, I also think that there's no way we see anybody following Hartline down to USF. I don't think he'd do that. As far as coaches, is there a possibility maybe Keenan follows him? Those two are tight. They've coached together for years. I suppose that could be a possibility if he wanted to try to give Keenan an opportunity to be an OC. But I think that Keenan is, potentially up for a promotion at Ohio State again. Who knows? And it would make, like, if I'm Hart putting together that staff, I want some veterans with me. I'm on my first rodeo here. I want some veteran presence, some guys that know what they're doing, not a first timer really anywhere. And it's going to be really interesting watching how he puts together this staff and who he's able to lean on as a resource. I think that Jim Tressel was a bit, played a decent sized role in him getting this South Florida job. And South Florida building a massive facility in a new stadium, $350 million they're putting into this new stadium, new facility, new, training room, everything, because they see the changing tides right now in college football. And they're trying to get themselves in the next big move, the next shift of conferences. They're trying to get themselves elevated into a power spot. That facility in that stadium opened in 27. So Hartline's second year there, they're going to be moving into this big stadium, and they're trying to make a push to move into the prime times of college football, and pumping a bunch of money into it. So as of now, here's what our chart looks like for the class of 2026 as we wrap around the country. The Texas number drops down from 2 to 1, losing Legend Bay. Chris Henry Jr. is magnified up there. That number was 4 with Caden Dixon-Wyatt. That's now dropped to 3. And then you've got the best player in the state of Indiana, Jaquaden Guilford, right now currently up in the air. So that is where we're at. With the addition of Caden Gephardt, Ohio moves to 11 dogs, 11 Ohio dogs. You got 1 Pennsylvania, 2 New Jersey, 1 Maryland, 1 Florida, 2 Georgia, 1 Alabama, 2 Louisiana, and 1 lone Texan, former TCU commit, Brock Boyd, to go along with 1 Arizona, and that was formerly 2 with Aaron Thomas. Now it's just Tucker Smith, who to me is a Ohio adjacent lineman. He is a bang your head against the wall type of dirt dog. And that is where we currently stand. I appreciate you guys as always, and I will be here all day with updates as things move and a shake. So talk to you soon. JUCK'S Bucks out.